thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and thank you for being out there on the street and fighting for the America and the world that we deserve. And speaking of resistors, we have a leading resistor with us tonight, my dear friend and collaborator, Cheri Honkala, who was the 2012 vice presidential campaign on the ticket with me. And I learned so much from Cheri, continue to learn so much from Cheri. And we are so fortunate that Cheri is taking the fight for us, for immigrants, for people of color, for women, for indigenous people, for workers, for all whose lives are on the line and have been on the line actually for quite some time, although we've sort of gone from the frying pan into the fire in these days of Donald Trump. But Cheri has been out there leading the charge for the most oppressed, the most disadvantaged, the most disenfranchised. Cheri has been leading with incredible courage and vision that really raises the bar for us all and is an inspiration to all of us, has always been an inspiration to me. And what's so exciting is that we're seeing millions of people pouring out into the streets right now to stand up for each other. And we are also, as the Green Party, we are taking that fight from the street into the voting booth. And we have such an exciting election that Cheri is running in. And Cheri specifically is running for state representative in Pennsylvania in the 197th representative district. And it is a special election. A special election where generally people don't turn out unless you have a base and unless you are getting out and organizing. And if anybody has a base anywhere, it's Cheri's base in the 197th district, one of the poorest districts in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, indeed in the country. And Cheri has really been leading the charge for economic justice, for the right to a job, for living wages, for the right to a roof over your head, generally for economic human rights. And let me just turn to Cheri now to just tell us in a few words, Cheri, about your background and how you have come to be drafted really by your community to represent them, one of the poorest districts in America, in this race. Tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into some of the unbelievably exciting things about this race.
Sure. First of all, I'm very happy to be here this evening, talking to folks across the country about what's happening here. I got involved in politics on the basis of necessity. I'm a formerly homeless mother. I lived in my car for quite some time, and then my car was totaled by a drunk driver. And I learned how to reclaim abandoned houses and move into them in order to keep myself and my 9-year-old son, Mark, alive at that time. So that's basically my background. Little did I know that I would spend all of my adult waking years helping to feed, clothe, and house, and more importantly, help develop leaders from the ranks of the poor.
And in doing that, you actually founded one organization, first the Kensington Welfare Rights Union, if I have the name right, which then evolved, if I understand correctly, into the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, which is a national campaign of poor, disenfranchised people, largely of color, who are standing up for basically their economic human rights. Tell us just a word about that organization, Cheri.
Well, we came to learn actually that the kinds of atrocities that we were suffering here, people in different parts of the world were actually using the words human rights and economic human rights violations. So to us, it made sense to begin to call things like people dying from hypothermia in a country where, people should have access to shelter, call it what it is. And so we began to call it human rights violations. And so we've been fighting for years now to take up where Dr. Martin Luther King left off in building a multiracial movement that's led by the poor in a fight for human rights.
And in fact, the Philadelphia Public Record, kind of the political journal that tells you, by Joe Shahili, just this last week, that recognized your campaign. And in fact, the title of the article is Honkala's Smart Move. And it starts off saying, almost everywhere that protests for poor people's rights make the news, odds are that the renowned Minnesota-born co-founder of the Kensington Welfare Rights Union and the national coordinator of the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, that is you, Cheri, that this woman can be found. She's either pictured yelling through a bullhorn or sitting in the middle of some highway blocking traffic or building a tent city for protest. And the article goes on, she's now a candidate for 190th district. We believe, get this, neither of the two major party candidates, social service-oriented nonprofit executive director Frederick Ramirez or Republican clinical research director Lucinda Little, neither of them can garner the attention of the national media like Honkala can. And then it goes on to say that this is a run that puts you right in the heart of your district where many of your protests were launched, and that you have created the image of a leader of the poor who can bring thousands of people together at almost a moment's notice, and that this race is going to really be your opportunity and your test to mobilize your district. And tell us a little bit about how people are mobilizing. I've heard that there are, what shall we say, that there's a lot of rumblings in your district about the Democratic, shall we say, the state of the Democratic Party. And in fact, the reason that you are running is because your predecessor, the Democratic legislator, just pled guilty to a felony fraud on charges related to some kind of money laundering or something of that sort. And that the Democratic Party is, shall we say, maybe a victim of its own corruption. And maybe it's time, or shall we say, its time has gone, and it's time for a new voice standing up for regular people. How about some of the conditions in your race that really make this a wide open race for the voice of the Green Party to stand up and really represent your district that has been thrown under the bus for so long?
Well, tonight I was really encouraged because I was met by a Democratic Party committee person that just ran over to me and gave me a hug and said, I want to learn about the Green Party. He said, I'm tired. The last two people that have represented this district are, headed to jail. It's one person after another that are caught up in all these different corruption scandals. And it's time that we have somebody like myself that has gone to jail for justice and not for corruption. I think the people in my district understand the deep commitment that I have, whether it's going to jail with the school teachers in my district, whether it's sleeping outside almost on, you know, every like 10, 12 blocks in my district, I've slept outside with members of my district that have been unable to get any kind of emergency shelter or affordable housing. I remember one night I was sitting with a Dominican woman that was literally going into labor and calling all of the elected officials and various different other, you know, supposed leaders in the community, and you know, at the last hour, having to ask poor residents of this community to gather together some money, and we ended up putting her at the Roosevelt Inn in order to, you know, have her off the streets while she was going into labor, and then, you know, finally she was able to move to the hospital. But that's only one of, like, you know, hundreds and hundreds of other horrible stories that I could tell. Especially, this district has been on national news recently with having the highest opiate drug overdoses in the entire country. And, you know, people kind of joke about it, but a couple of years ago, I had to literally go and get ordained online because it was costing too much to try and find different members of the community to bury people, so that I was able to, you know, bury people in my community.
I have to say, Cheri, for the years that I've known you, you really give a whole new meaning to what's happening, and I have rarely known you not to have your home full of people who need a place to stay. I have known you to be called actually by your Department of Social Services when they need to place a child in emergency shelter and with emergency caretaking. I know that they have turned to you in order to be that emergency family support. And this is the kind of commitment that Cheri brings to the community, and she will put whole new meaning to the concept of fighting for your neighborhood when she goes to the legislature. And I think it's up to all of us to make this happen at this moment in time when we are fighting and resisting out there and saying no to these terrible things that the Trump neo-fascist movement wants to do, or the things that the Democratic neoliberal movement has done, bailing out Wall Street, sending our jobs overseas in their war on workers, privatizing our schools. This is the time for us. This is a breakthrough campaign. This is a totally breakthrough campaign and a breakthrough moment. And I want to encourage everybody who's listening now to go to Cheri197.com. That's on the web at Cheri197.com. That stands for the 197th District. And you can press that little button that says donate. And if you can give $5, donate $5. If you can give 50, donate 50. If you can give 500, donate 500. This is that once in a blue moon breakthrough race, a special election where getting your base out, which Cheri has, can make all the difference. Where the two previous Democratic legislators have gone to jail for corruption, this is the time for us to stand up with that full-bore, radical progressive agenda that Cheri is the epitome of. So please join me in making a contribution. You can also volunteer. And if you are not in Cheri's district, you can still volunteer and help with phone banking to get the word out and let people know so that they will come out and be a part of this revolution at the ballot box with this absolutely revolutionary candidate. There's a bunch of questions here, Cheri, and wishes for you. So Lainey Schmidt says, good luck, Cheri. I ran for election last year. It was an indescribable experience. I wish you the best. Thank you, Lainey. Lou Novak says, Cheri has walked the walk, not just talked the talk. She has indeed. Alan Friedman says, who are these angry faces? I presume that's floating across Facebook. People were complaining that Green Party folks only show up in big elections, and here they are fighting the fight when we most need their work to save us from this disaster. Thank you, Alan. Sean Declet says, I'm so excited that one of our hashtag Heroes for Democracy is running again. I can't wait till next Tuesday when I can donate. Maybe that's when he gets his paycheck or something. Because if you have got money in your account, you can donate right now. If you need to wait till that paycheck comes in, you can wait till that paycheck. But the sooner, the better. J.G. Sandom, one of our Hofstra heroes who laid his body on the line for democracy, for our right to an open debate. And let me just tell you, everybody who laid your body on the line there to open up our debates, we are now, that is the Green Party, is a part of a lawsuit against the Commission on Presidential Debates. Our campaign was contacted about 2 years ago by the people running this lawsuit, and we brought in the Green Party and also the Libertarian parties so that this lawsuit would have more standing. Anyhow, we had a big victory, and we are moving ahead with this lawsuit. So hold on to your hat. We may indeed begin to see the debates opened up, and it's a tribute to everyone who put their bodies on the line. Thank you, J.G. Sandom. And he says, the Hofstra 22 are with you. Michael Arthur Georgeson says, this is the kind of election that Greens dream about. There are basically no Republicans in this district, and the previous Democrat just had to resign in disgrace. We already have ballot access. We have a great chance for a big impact. With a relatively small number of votes, we can get a Green in a position to make decisions about the entire state. Donate or volunteer if you can. Thank you, Michael. Okay, here's a question for you, Cheri. Joanne Gordon says, how can we help you get elected? Where is your office?
My office is located at 6th and Venango. And I want to encourage folks. There's people there every single day. I need people to, if they don't live in Philadelphia, they can give us a call. They can give us a call. They can set up their own phone banking in your city. Like the comment earlier, this is very exciting because I only need like about 3,000 votes in order to win. This is a total winnable race. And it's so important right now because this is a community made up of folks from the front lines, people that are struggling with not wanting to be deported, folks that are struggling to feed, clothe, and house themselves and their families. You know, people can also, if you want to, you can go to Cheri, that's CHERI 197.com/volunteer. You know, and, you know, sign up to get involved today. We intend to door knock this entire district. We intend to ensure that people understand clearly what's happening in our neighborhood.
Awesome. And let me just add that if you just go to Cheri197.com, there are two beautiful buttons right there. I think they're red, if I remember correctly. One says volunteer, so whether you live in the district or whether you live in California, it doesn't matter. You can make all the difference. And remember, if we get Cheri in to the state legislature in Philadelphia, this is going to open the floodgates to similar fights to get into office all around the country. This is what we've been waiting for, is this perfect race with the perfect candidate for this breakthrough at the perfect time. People are so mobilized right now. in no small measure due to this crisis going on with our presidency. And we do indeed have the makings of a constitutional crisis. And many of us would not be surprised to see impeachment proceedings at some point down the line. We do have this crisis. This crisis is mobilizing us like we haven't seen in generations. And one of the ways we need to respond to this crisis is taking this fight into the voting booth, and then from the voting booth into the state legislatures. And for Cheri to lead the way would be just the most wonderful, heartwarming thing imaginable. So go to Cheri, CHERI197.com, and push that volunteer button or push that donate button, and actually push them both. Whether you can give $500 or $5, either way, it's just your stepping up and making it happen. If everybody does something, together we can change everything. And Cheri's the one who can lead the way. Sean Declet says, hold on one second. All right, here we go. I was frozen here. All right. Okay, Michael Arthur Georgeson says, this is the kind of election, no, sorry, that's a repeat. Joanne Gordon, where's your office? We got that one. All right. Cheri, tell us what you would say the 2 or 3 leading issues are for your district.
I definitely think that the issue of gentrification and stolen land and hoarded resources. I know many poor communities are dealing with this across the entire country. We're definitely dealing with it here, where we're fighting for a community land trust, and some folks want to take that community land trust and turn it into a land grab. So definitely having me in Harrisburg would mean that the Walmarts, the big bankers and developers would have a difficult time continuing to tear our community apart and, build $400,000 homes. And instead, we would be about the business of building affordable housing and establishing the very first ever homeless shelter, particularly that was accessible to Spanish-speaking communities. We've never had a Spanish-speaking shelter in the city of Philadelphia, even though we have a very high Spanish-speaking population.
And let me urge people who are listening to please like this conversation and share it so we can get the word out about Cheri and this incredible breakthrough game changer of a race that we can make all the difference in by making a contribution, by volunteering, by phone banking, by canvassing if you're in the district. I found the other questions here. And by the way, do post your questions. We're raking them in, and we will try to get to as many as we can. Rob Indemick says, go Cheri, get these Republicans or Democrats out and put a real party for the people in. Thank you, Rob. James Nicola says, proudly donated to Cheri's campaign last night. Go Cheri. Diana Fa'alif says, hey Cheri, a new Philly is coming. We met in Harrisburg. Can I vote? I'm in McKean County, Pennsylvania. I take it that's not your district, is that right?
No, but how she can show her vote is by going online, making a financial contribution, or getting the folks in her part of the state to vote for me, because having somebody like myself in Harrisburg, I can do a lot of things, not just for folks in my district. All of us are going to be impacted by the Keystone Pipeline, by the horrible policies of the oil industry. And I can be a real, activist in Harrisburg to ensure that we have clean water, not just in Philadelphia and in Kensington, but in our entire state.
That's right. Cheri, Cheri will be a representative not just for her district, really, but for the 99%, wherever we are, even like all across the nation, if I dare say. Cheri will be the representative for all of us, blazing the trail for many more representatives. So, Diana, please get the word out, and you can volunteer. You can go to Cheri's district and help with that door knocking, and you can make a contribution and get your friends to do the same. Thank you so much, Diana. Gabino Morales Escamilla says, how can I be a voice for dreamers as I am myself? The Hispanic community needs you. And Gabino is writing from New York. Say a few words about how you will stand up for dreamers, Cheri.
We will make sure that we stop Senate Bill 10 in Harrisburg. My district will always be a sanctuary district. And I don't care if we have to provide sanctuary for immigrants that are under attack by having to stop people in my own district office or in the Capitol in Harrisburg. People will not be deported under my watch.
Awesome. Amen to that. Patricia Augustine says, are there flyers we can print out yet? I will be in Philly next week and can hand out flyers.
Absolutely. We are going to be making the flyer available on the website so that people are able to download it and get it out to as many people as possible. She can also go to the Cheri 197 / volunteer and sign up to assist us in getting out as much print materials as possible, because we're up against great odds. We're up against big money, and let's not be fooled. The powers that be in the Capitol and in Harrisburg understand what a potential problem I can be in this Trump era to stop all these repressive laws that are trying to be passed. So whatever help that we can get, we really need money in order to take on this big machine.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, Lou Novak just wrote in, my mom just donated to Cheri Honkala's campaign. Please donate to this longtime advocate and justice fighter. Hashtag, we are the 197th. We are all the 197th. And everybody, get your mother to donate. Cheri stands for everything that mothering is about, everything that compassion and caring is about. Cheri's kind of the ultimate mother for everyone. So everybody contribute and ask your mother to contribute. Stephen Boyle says, Cheri, can you make a prison visit regarding the withholding of Hep C medication to Mumia Abu Jamal? I've posted a note into the event for reference. It references him in Philadelphia.
Absolutely. I also think, besides what's happening to Mumia being denied necessary medical care, I know that in my district, the issue of mass incarceration is a big issue with young people literally being a part of the school to prison pipeline, not being given any kind of opportunities, people being denied access to recovery, jobs not being available, all of these kinds of things. That new Philadelphia is definitely going to come, and we're no longer going to tolerate the attacks that are happening in my district. And absolutely, I think that what's happening to Mumia is absolutely inhumane, as well as many of our other prisoners and family members that are having to visit loved ones on a weekly basis and watching the inhumane conditions that they're in.
Bill Fife says, see, it just disappeared off my screen. Here we go. Bill Fife says, quote, "They will not be deported under my watch," unquote, which is what Cheri just said. And he says, awesome to that. And then Diana just followed up as well, and this disappeared from my screen. Here we go. Follow up saying that she's like 5 hours from Philly, but she's going to phone bank for you, and she'll be calling your office about getting started. So I think that takes us, okay. All right. We got 2 more questions here that we just have time for. Cecilia Cross says, Cheri, how will you make sure you are representing the disabled in your district?
Boy, that's a huge issue. There's like 44% of the people in my district, according to Liberty Resources, are disabled. So I'm very familiar with this issue. I have a beautiful 14-year-old Puerto Rican son that has 2 disabilities. He's autistic, and he was recently diagnosed with narcolepsy. So I know I know some of the issues, major issues firsthand, and I will definitely guarantee you that I will be an advocate that young people that go to school that have disabilities have the same kind of access to quality education. I have been fighting here forever with Disabled in Action and Liberty Resources to ensure that not only do people with disabilities have access to quality health care, but also to quality, accessible, affordable housing. And I will continue to be that strong advocate for my disabled brothers and sisters.
And Dave Heller says, what plans do you have to implement ranked choice voting? And I'll just, remind people that the state of Maine, in part thanks to the work of the Green Party in Maine, they just passed by voter referendum a law creating ranked choice voting, which means you get to rank your choices when you go to the polls and you vote for, say, mayor or for governor or the other statewide offices. When there's just a single person in the race, you get to rank your choices and put your true values in front of your fears or your worries about how it's all gonna, how the votes will sort out or be split. You don't have to worry about that. It's not a strategy vote. It's a values vote. And if there's anything our democracy needs now, it's our values, because our values have gotten tossed out when people go to the polls, voting mainly on the question of who are you most afraid of, which is what most people were doing in the last presidential race. So ranked choice voting is fabulous, and we encourage everybody in every state to get involved and to start working for ranked choice voting, usually by referendum, because generally the parties in power don't want it and they won't allow it to pass through the legislatures. Is there anything going on with ranked choice voting or otherwise with voting reform, Cheri, in your neck of the woods?
Well, yes and no. I think that there's nothing official that I'm aware of, but one thing that I would say is that we have a conference here in Philadelphia on February 25th and 26th at Arch Street Meeting House on 4th and Race. And I just want to encourage folks to come out, because I think that we're, whether we're talking about ranked choice voting or any other topic, it begins with consciousness and an understanding of what this fight for democracy is really about and how that involves elections. So, you know, I think you said this earlier, Jill. There's a new climate that's out there in the country now, and I think that people are really understanding that they have to begin to get involved in the political process, and I think that's where it actually begins.
And two more questions here, Cheri. One from Paul Massich, who says, will you support workers and middle class issues?
Well, all I know is workers, actually. I think, you know, first of all, with unemployed and welfare recipients, I've never known a welfare recipient that just wants a bigger and better check. Actually, I think some of the biggest stereotypes out there is that poor people don't work. And actually, they're the hardest workers I've ever seen. Nowadays, you know, most people that I know work 2 and 3, maybe 4 jobs. And that definitely includes, you know, the shrinking middle class. And I've always been a strong advocate of organized labor. I'm meeting with, you know, I've been in discussion with 4 of the largest unions here in Philadelphia recently about my campaign and the importance of it. All of them have been in dialogue with me because they know that I have definitely walked the walk and have walked on every single picket line here and gone to jail, whether they've tried to attack the sanitation workers or the teachers or the hospital workers, you name it, absolutely. I'm, you know, a strong fighter for all workers in Pennsylvania.
No doubt about it. Our last comments, which I'll just say briefly because we're getting a little bit of feedback. Rob Indemick says, I love the Green Party because they are addressing real issues instead of platitudes. Thank you, Cheri, Jill, and the Green Party. Thank you, Rob. And thanks so much to Cheri for standing up and fighting the way forward like you always have. And this is just, you know, this is like the moment of our dreams right now. This is like a drop everything moment. This is like a all hands on deck moment. And I really urge everyone out there to get involved and do your part. This is a totally winnable race here. If it's only going to take some thousands of votes, we can get the people out there knocking on the doors, making the phone calls. Just go to Cheri197.com and sign up to volunteer and throw something into the hat. And thank you all so much. Thank you, Cheri. And we look forward to seeing you again soon here on our Green News Network. And remember, green news is good news. Good night, everybody.
And we are the 197.